So, this is the last part of my bookshelf tour where I will talk about my religious books. So, I'm going to start right off the bat. Let's see if I can do this without the whole stack falling down. I already failed. So, the first one is the Analects of Confucius. I used to have another copy of this that was this, like, lousy paperback. One of those, gigantic paperbacks that's super skinny, and I just hated it. So, but I love this edition. There's kind of a nice picture on the front. Actually, this appears to be a part of some kind of a series. Because on the back there's like lists of other books that have been published like this, like the Annals of Imperial Rome by Tacitus, the Civil War by Caesar, the Confessions of St. Augustine. So anyway, I've read this twice. Obviously, Confucius had a lot of problematic ideas about social hierarchy and kind of patriarchy, but if you can kind of get past those, there's so much wisdom to be found. In what actually drew me to read the Analects was a quote from the Analects that was included in the textbook for my course in college. That was my introduction to social psychology. And the quote was, "To know a thing, to hold that you know it. To not know a thing, to allow that you do not know it. This is knowledge." And that's really the quote that drew me to the Analects. And yeah, I still love that quote. Obviously, I haven't memorized, but there's a lot more in here, just about life and society and corruption. Yeah. Next one is The Wisdom of the Native Americans, edited by Kent Nerburn. And this is basically it has a lot of quotes from a lot of medicine men and chiefs, some quotes longer than others, but just lots of good lines to draw on. I used to have a binder, I think I mentioned the binder, where I used to write down quotes from books that I read that I liked, and there's a lot from this in there. And there's also 3 speeches written by 3 different Native American chiefs, and also the entirety of a book by a man named Charles Eastman, called The Soul of an Indian, which is kind of he discusses just the way of life of the tribe he comes from, and yeah, so that's interesting. And Charles Eastman also wrote Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, which, the movie of which I've seen, but the book I haven't read, but I want to. Yeah. And also, one of the speeches here is by Chief Joseph, who I personally have a weakness for, because I wrote a paper in 11th grade about the Nez Perce War, and so I really want to learn more about Chief Joseph. Anyway, next is the Essential Dao, translated and arranged by Thomas Cleary. This has the Tao Te Ching in it, the foundational text of Taoism, which is basically a series of poems, and then the first 7 chapters of something called the Chuang Tzu, which is a series of essays which are also important in Taoism, which are attributed to this man named Chuang Tzu, but probably a lot of them weren't written by him. But this has the first 7 chapters, which are called the inner chapters, and they're kind of the most important, and they're interesting. There's a story in one of them where a man dreams that he's a butterfly, and then he wakes up and he's uncertain whether maybe he's dreaming that he's a man and really he's a butterfly. And that happened, thousands of years before Descartes. So that's interesting to see. So there's that. And the Tao Te Ching, again, just a repository of wisdom, a fascinating book. And the next one is one I wouldn't recommend ever. It's the Texts of Taoism, which I got from ForgottenBooks.com. Don't get these editions, they're awful. I'm just waiting to find another one that has this has the Tao Te Ching in it, and I do not recommend the translation, and it also has the inner chapters, which are both in the other book I just showed, and I do not recommend the translations. The reason I have this is because this has the outer chapters of the Chuang Tzu, and I haven't been able to find a good edition of those yet, so that's why this is here. As soon as I find another edition, I am possibly not even donating this, because I don't want to allow anyone else to read this awful translation. Yeah. Next three, I'm gonna do all at once. Hold on a sec. Just put those like that for now. Okay, there we go. Now I don't have to hold my arm up again. So these are a series of the classics of Indian spirituality that were translated by Eknath Easwaran, and this is the Dhammapada, which is an important text, which is an influential text in Buddhism, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Upanishads. I don't know how important the Dhammapada really is in Buddhism in the East. It's a text that a lot of Westerners have gone to learn about Buddhism, but I took a course on Buddhism in my senior year of college, and the professor never even mentioned the Dhammapada. So I don't know how important it really is to Buddhism. But I still found it interesting. Eknath Easwaran does an introduction for each of these books, and to the text itself, and then has a commentary on each selection, each chapter, or each section of the whatever text that's in these, and those are really helpful to understanding them, especially the Upanishads, which can be pretty crazy and pretty difficult at times. But yeah, probably my favorite of these is the Upanishads. Just a lot of psychological insights, I think, and I don't know. Anyway, those three. Next one shouldn't be a surprise. The Bible. This is the King James Bible because I love the language in the King James Bible. This is the edition published by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, better known as the Mormon Church. And the reason I like their edition is because they have, at the beginning of every chapter, they have a nice little summary. I don't know if it's really clear there, but in the top here, there's in italics a summary. That can be helpful, especially when you're reading the King James Bible, because the language is beautiful, but sometimes it can be hard to follow. So those little introductions to what's actually happening are I think quite helpful. So yeah, I read this cover to cover once, although I tried to read it like 5 times. But I would always start with the Book of Genesis over again. And so I've read the Book of Genesis, even though I read the Bible only once. I read the Book of Genesis like 4 or 5 times all the way through. So I know the Book of Genesis far too well. But yeah. Next is a cute little thing. It's Native American wisdom. It's just another book of quotes from Native American chiefs and medicine men and medicine women. Yeah, I used to put tags in quotes that I liked, and yeah, this is cute. I keep it. I open it every now and then. Some interesting things. Yeah. And then finally we have Muhammad Marmaduke Pickthall's translation of the Quran. Yeah, I don't know if that's clear, but yeah. Anyway, so I got this from my grandma just before she died. This was the edition I read. Yeah, I don't want to say too much about the Quran because I don't want to end up saying anything controversial, but the Quran is here. I have read it. I keep it, so I want to reread it someday. Yeah, that's here. And that is all the books that I own currently. Well, not necessarily. I have books at home with my parents. And so it's hit me while I've done this that this tour will soon be kind of obsolete because I'm going to be bringing a bunch of books back from my parents' house and I'll do a haul when I get back with those. But that will mean that this tour is kind of out of date. Will be out of date pretty soon. But whatever, I don't mind. Again, this was just an excuse for me to talk about books. So if you've watched to this point, thank you for tolerating my narcissism and my belief that anyone would care to see the books on my shelf and care to hear what I have to say about them. But thank you. Goodbye.